Thank you so much for listening to another episode of CX Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Brady Chisana. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles podcast. Super excited for today's show, guys. We have an awesome guest. Pasquale DeMaio, Vice President at AWS, is joining us. Pasquale, say hello to the CX Nation, my friend.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
100%. So, Pasquale, we were just joking before jumping into today's conversation. You've been a busy man, my friend. You've been all over all of the different podcasts and all over the different mediums, talking about all the incredible things that Amazon Web Services is doing. But why you're here today and why I was pumped to have you, you're talking about all the different ways that people need to think about creating, enhancing, and constantly iterating on how you make an incredible customer experience. And I imagine at a company the size of AWS, that's a big ask, man. So I'm pumped to kind of get into some of the stuff with you today and learn about the things that you guys are doing at AWS.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I love to talk about AWS and the things we've done here, and particularly on Connect, the way we've thought about things maybe a little bit differently than anybody else. And so I couldn't ask for a better venue than this one.
I love it. So, okay, let's jump into, so before we get into the pillars, I love starting all of our shows this way. Just spend like a few minutes. How'd you get into the role that you're in today? What were some of the stepping stones, or what was some of the early Pasquale journey when you're early in your career? What got you into this whole space and place, and what made you gravitate towards thinking about customer experience, thinking about some of the technology that applies to it? How'd you get into all this?
Yeah, so I really love building software. I have my whole career. I went to school for electrical engineering, but quickly moved into software. And I've been really passionate about what you can do because sort of it's unlimited. And and early in my career, I had worked on a bunch of different things, everything from touch screens to you name it. And then I got this bug that I really wanted to build web services. And so I said, well, where do you go do that? And I thought to myself, well, at the time, and this was back in like 2012, 2011, I was like, well, Amazon is really the people who are doing this, and AWS was still a lot smaller than it is now. And I just said, that's what I want to go do. But I also wanted to I had to figure out how to do that effectively. And I knew that Amazon was a very culturally strong company. Like, we have a big belief in striving to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. We have a big belief in customer obsession. Our leadership principles are clearly written out. They're shared for everybody. And when we talk to people about coming to work here, it always centers around those experiences. And so I knew I needed to kind of come and figure out a way to do that in a way where I would join that culture, meld with it. I love the idea of the leadership principles, but I also knew I had to learn them. And so I wanted to give myself a great stepping stone. So when I talk to people about career, I always say to them, your career is a little bit like a stool. If you have one leg, it's not very well balanced. One leg might be, hey, I'm good at product management, but that's great. Two legs, I'm good at product management. I know an area like really well. So let's say I know a lot about CX or something like that, customer experience. Three legs is I know the area and I understand the company culture. Four legs is I know the people who I'm going to be working with. You get five legs and maybe you've got too many legs. Now you're wasting it. And so you're challenging yourself anymore, right? And so I always say to people, make sure you've got enough legs to have some balance, but not too many legs that you're bored and not really doing it. And so I said, hey, I'm going to come to Amazon. I'm going to go learn the area. When I got here, I found these folks who had been working on this customer service platform, and it was really for internal customers, like 150 internal customers. So it was a big platform, like 100,000 people working on it, working as agents in Amazon broadly, for example. And so it was really well built for this internal tool. It wasn't great for external customers. It was, it wasn't real pretty. Let me put it that way. Don't tell them I said that. But when I did what they did, I got so excited, and I said, hey, this is the web service I want to do. So I said, do you guys want to go do this with me, and we can go try and pitch this as an AWS service? And so they said yes. And we went down the path. And so we went and pitched it to Andy Jassy, who was the CEO of AWS at that point. Now he's the CEO of all of Amazon. And after a number of months, a few different documents to demonstrate it, he approved it. And then we kind of went into, let's turn this into a product mode, and went, deep cover, and emerged in 2017 with our very first version at Enterprise Connect in Orlando. And ever since then, we just kept chugging along, building and building based on customer feedback. And we got so much great customer engagement and feedback early on that Andy was willing to invest pretty heavily in it. And since then, we've become one of the fastest growing services in AWS history. And so that's been really cool for us. And so I don't know if that was what you're looking for, but that's kind of been my journey to get here.
I mean, look, so number one, thank you for sharing that. That's spot on. And like for our listeners, Pasquale, like web services is become a behemoth, right? Like in 2024, AWS generated 107 plus billion in revenue, and growing year over year at almost 20%. But something you just said that's even more impressive, that leads to why that type of financial performance or that type of market performance. Look, if you could build something that works for Amazon extremely well internally, you mentioned, you guys started building it internally for internal usage, and I got to imagine the man that external spend, if Amazon didn't have an internal solution like that, would have been crazy. So probably a lot of motivation to make sure that there was something inside of it. But like, if it works for Amazon, man, it's gonna work for anybody, right? And then and so that's what you guys have been doing, and so awesome stuff. Let's jump into the first pillar of team. I'd love to share a little bit about your team at AWS. Talk about maybe some of the different teams or departments or roles that you're working with the closest on a daily basis, and yeah, start getting into sort of how you guys have laid out some of the different players and some of the different subject matter experts in your business and on your team across the pitch as the business has grown to be able to support this type of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing I'll say is when I think about team, I think about human beings, and you want to do two things that I think are very important. One of them is you need to think about how you're going to enable people to do great work. The purpose of a team is the individuals to execute, and the thing that the team does is allow them to do it as a group successfully. And maybe that's an obvious statement, but I think people lose track of, like, as a leader, sometimes your job is not to be better at your job. Your job is to help all those people around you to be better at their jobs. And so when I found the folks who were working on this, one of the big decisions I had to make was, is this what I want to think about for my day-to-day for the next number of years? Not the next number of weeks, next number of months, but if we're going to go down this path, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging to build a service essentially externally now for the ground up. Obviously, we had the great technology we're using for ourselves, but it really was going to be a whole new thing. I had to make sure that looking around, so that these are the people I want to spend my days with every day. Doesn't mean I have to always want to spend my weekend with them too, but I need to be able to be really happy and excited about these human beings. And I looked at them, I said, these are good people. These are people I want to spend time with. And those folks are all pretty much universally still on the team, still working with us. So of the folks who were working on the project, the four main leaders are still here working on it today. Now we're, 8 years later. And as we've grown together, we've taken the time I would say, every few months we look at resourcing, like every 3 months. Every year we do a whole operational review and say, hey, have we thought about our priorities right? And we can stop anytime and dive in. We don't have to wait that time, but it's important to keep some cadence of that. And then every 2 to 3 years, I tend to think it's about the right time to make some more significant changes, because that's probably true. It's probably you've grown enough, hopefully, that it's the right time. It's also a good time to reflect back and say to yourself, are we getting stuck in our ways, right? Because even if you have someone who's exceptional at their job, if they do it for too long, no matter what, they're going to probably start to become set in the ways that aren't necessarily the most forward.
Insularity begins to creep in. Yeah, if you're looking at the same problem too damn long, you start to be, there's insularness that pops into the equation.
Yep, and exactly. And so those are the kind of the mental model I have around team formation. Right now, the way I think about my team, if I think about my team, I think about it quite a bit about the way I think about the product. And I want people to be able to move really quickly, and I want them to be able to make decisions. I know it's something that has many pieces that connect together, that I can't have people fully separated and have full autonomy of every single decision, because they depend on each other for things. And that's what makes Connect so amazing, is all these parts work so well together. And so I'll start and say, the very first at the foundation, I think about communications. No one buys a contact center for the communications. Like, you have a cell phone in your pocket that's pretty good at communicating with people. The problem is not connecting those two things, but your communications in a contact center have to be rock solid. They have to be better than what better than anything you would expect off the shelf, even better than you would do for enterprise grade telephony, for example. And so in fact, I've got a team that does nothing but focus on building tier 1 carrier integrations all over the world. I've yet to see anything that matches it. We're somewhere around 40 total carriers interconnected to us around the world.
What are some of the biggest ones, Pasquale? Just for the listeners, give a sense for some of the largest carriers that you're working with on a daily basis.
Well, we don't disclose the names of the carriers, but I will tell you that if you can name a major carrier in the US, for example, we're fully integrated.
Yep.
So
Okay.
like if you think about the leaders and the tier one carriers around the world, typically those would be the people you would think of.
Yep.
And so we go into when we go into a new region, we will go and try and partner with the very best offerings there.
Pasquale, the only reason why I asked is there was a few weeks back at Customer Contact Week in Las Vegas. There was a lot of side talk and a lot of yammering about carriers and some of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. And for big companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, guys, the numbers and the volume of communications that those super large companies rely on those carriers to be able to perform on is critical. It's crucial. And Pasquale, I think even a lot of smart, seasoned, experienced CX and contact center execs, they don't always maybe think about this. They've got other people that are taking care of this type of a problem, but super interesting in terms of sort of like that becoming another big part of sort of how you have to think about the team and how the hell you're going to make sure that AWS and Connect is working, seamlessly on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think that underlying communication channel is mission critical, right? And we at Amazon, this is kind of in our belief system is we want to take on really hard problems, and then we want to do them at a level operationally that no one else can do is always our kind of mental model. I think it's the way we kind of operate as human beings, which is just these kind of things may bore other people, but they excite us. And so that example I'll give you a weird example, but in one country we went into with a carrier, they were the leading carrier in the country, and we looked at what they were doing for error handling, and we found that we said, hey, we've done this a lot of places. We think we could improve your error handling here if we did X, Y, and we talked to them and said, hey, would you be willing to do this with us? And they said yes. And now every person in that country gets better coverage with
That's
their
amazing. That's
the
amazing.
work we did with them, and they were really happy, excited about it. It's like, and that's great, and we learned from them too. It's just
It's a partnership. At that point, that's a strategic partnership where you're literally enhancing each other's services. You're enhancing the consumer's experience, which is the most important thing because that drives all the good stuff for everybody, right? Whether it's financial or whether it's some of the other types of business performance. But I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah. Well, I think on top of this, then we build an engine that drives all of the flows and process across all of Connect runs through a single engine. So no matter what channel you're on, it's all going through that, whether that be something like chat or voice, or whether it's tasks, which don't require any interaction with an end customer, but you can do things like back office or processing insurance claims. All those things are in one engine. And the reason why that one engine is really important is because it lets you move really quickly to develop two other things that are what the customer cares about, which is the automation capabilities, the AI integrations on the front end. So you can look at every one of these things exactly the same and apply the same flows and workflow on top of it. And so if you have someone who knows how to build a chat bot, they already know how to build a voice bot, they already know how to automate your tasks, they already know how to automate email. That's a really powerful thing to say. And even we took that to the next extension and said, how do we even allow us to automate things for agents so they can see step-by-step experiences, which is an amazing thing. That's a great example of bringing those things together. And I'll give you another little anecdote there, which I love, is we actually asked our agents to volunteer if they wanted to help make the product better. And they said, yes. We said, well, we want to put a heart rate monitor on you and see how it actually feels to be using the old version and the new version.
Yeah.
Their heart rates dropped because they were less stressed out trying to deal with all the technology challenges and more having a better experience. And so when we saw those results, we got pretty excited and said, at least we really got to go push down. So that's how we built our step-by-step, our guides experience in Connect was based on those learnings. But that's all running on the same engine. And that means the companies who want to use Connect, they're getting so much advantage out of that because they can move so quickly to build on it. On the other end of the thing, let's say that the input of the experience or the automation parts of it and the workflow part of it. On the other end is the analytics. And analytics are where it's at in contact center, right? It's because you want to learn from everything. And so if you have one engine doing all this stuff, the analytics are all unified on the backside. So instead of saying, oh, my chat's doing this, my voice is doing that, and trying to get them to talk, you've got instead one set. And if people want to move between modalities and all these things, it's all connected. So you get a much better set of analytics. And when I talk to customers, the thing that we're jointly really excited about is how do we actually take those analytics and move past the legacy of average handle time, which is interesting, but not the way you want to think about your customer engagement. But how do we think about how we're going to fundamentally change the way we measure outcomes in the contact center? And so this year earlier, we brought this thing we've called the next generation of Connect. And we updated Connect to include all you can eat AI across every touch point. So you just buy it for one price and you get to use AI everywhere from the very beginning of any automated chat conversation all the way to the agents wrapping up the call and they don't want to do any interactions. We can do summaries and do all the categorization and even the evaluation of every single contact.
Pasquale, what types of companies or what types of what is like the bread and butter type of company that is opting into this, number one, and then number two, how much sophistication are they coming with as it relates to how to leverage AI or how to even think about deploying and utilizing AI across a tech stack? And actually, maybe perfect segment into the second pillar of tools here, because I know that this might get technical, but like first part is just what type of companies are already ready for this and they're ready to rock and roll and they already know, a buffet of AI on Amazon. Let's rock and roll. Let's go. But what's the level of sophistication that some of those leaders and some of those businesses are coming with to be able to even understand how to unlock and how to lever and how to utilize to be able to get some of the gains that you're positioning here?
Yeah, that is a super interesting question. The first thing I would say is we've got both ends of the spectrum there. So we have customers like a DoorDash who are very excited about taking all of their AI learnings that they have and bringing them into Connect and then using them, exposing them, and they want to go actually manage and build their own models inside of Bedrock, which is an AWS service that makes it easy to build models, but without having to do all the underlying management, but still gives you real tight control over everything you're doing. And on that end of the spectrum, we make Connect very easy to integrate. And so they love it. We work with them and partner with them to deliver a great outcome for their customers on that. And for example, their dashers who do all those deliveries, those dashers could go anywhere. They could be working for a competitor that day, or they're not employees of DoorDash. Instead, they are basically in some ways a customer of DoorDash, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so in that scenario, they're very focused on making that an amazing outcome. So we work with them to build a great set of experiences for those dashers. Then my team and their team, but our team learns from that. We take that and we build it into a much simpler experience that then we can offer to customers who aren't at that level of sophistication or don't want to make that level of investment and still want to get great outcomes. And so then we expose that inside of Connect as self-service and agent assistance that you can get without having to go build your own models. We make it so it's incredibly easy to suck all the data into it you need from across your enterprise and then be able to create the knowledge you want and then expose that back out. And so on that side, you might get someone who's still, I think, a very thoughtful and great company, but like a Traeger Grills might say, okay, on Orbit's irrigation, they may not want to hire a lot of scientists, but they still want to get that same benefit. And so I look at that, and then they get great outcomes from this without having to go make that same investment that DoorDash did. And I think we love both at Amazon. It's sort of right up our alley to say, how do we give you that flexibility to go across the whole realm? So I think that's a really important part of the sort of secret sauce of what makes Connect attractive.
Well, so to totally agree. And then to take it a step further, look, the reality is, annually companies are already spending 1.27 plus trillion dollars a year on software. Global utilization, even though this is a hard computation, because most people don't even know how to compute their tech stack utilization, which is a whole other, that could be we could do a whole hour episode just on that, on tech stack utilization computation, and then benchmarking and understanding what's great, what's good, what's shit. But going back to what you just said, the ability to have one place, one tool, one primary mechanism within the tech stack, because let's call it what it is. And I know you know this way better than me, just sitting in your current seat, but like one of the hardest things for most leaders to do is once that tech stack starts to grow, once the sales team and the market team get their CRM and they get their email, or they get their marketing management solution, once ops gets whatever they need for their ticketing and their issue resolution, then you bring the telephonics or the communications into it, becomes very quickly, even for smaller businesses that aren't even doing anywhere near the numbers of an AWS, even companies that are doing tens of millions per year, it becomes a tricky thing to do. Number one, just tech stack management. Number two, tech stack integrations always continue to become more burdensome or difficult, or then you need you mentioned resources a few times here, just in the beginning, just so far as we've got into this conversation. Then most companies struggle to have the right resources to understand how to aggregate and essentially centralize what me and you might call the voice of the customer or the pulse of the customer, right? And man, if you could have like a one-stop shop or one place, and then more importantly, if it's designed and built by a team of humans who are doing it arguably some of the most massive scale that the world has ever seen in terms of transactions and customer. I mean, let's call it what it is. Everybody that we know primarily uses Amazon, or actually, like it's rare when you come across someone that doesn't use it. But like that is a game changer. And then to your point, whether you're doing $100 billion a year, whether you're doing $10 million a year, the ability of having that centralized information, having everything aggregated, not maybe needing to go spend or deploy other resources that you could otherwise be re-leveraging for other things, say growth or marketing or getting, more of your products or your widgets or your willies or your wares out there in the world. Man, that's a game changer. That's a huge game changer. One question: you mentioned that you'll work with your customers and you'll help your customers to make sure that. What does that look like, out of curiosity, from like an implementation perspective? How far does an AWS go, or how far will your team go in terms of making sure that a new customer has what they need, they know how to use it, they know how to leverage it, and they feel confident about the analytics and the information that they're seeing?
Yeah, the comments you made a second ago actually play really deeply into this, which is having this one stop, this one continual experience is so important to be able to enable customers. And I will say that the key piece to make what I'm about to say possible is you have to build the software from the ground up to really be designed to enable customers to be able to use it. And that sounds sort of obvious, but a lot of folks, you just keep bolting more and more features onto the software. And before you know it, instead, you've got this Frankenstein of software, or even worse, you're buying companies and just bolting them on. And of course, they'll never really truly integrate right. And so we took a very opposite approach of saying from the ground up, we're going to build this thing to operate as a single unit. And we talked a little bit about that, so I won't bore you with it again. But the point being is then once you make it that way, then when you go out and the old story about teaching a person to fish, like we are able to go in and have really impactful experiences with a customer. So I have a saying I'll always use, which is like, we'll do these things where we bring a group of customers in for a day. And we say, hey, walk in with a laptop, walk out with a contact center. And by the end of the day,
I
they will
like
have actually
that. Did you come up with that?
yeah, but they
Nice.
will have fully implemented an AI enabled contact center that's designed and customized to them, and they can take that same contact center without doing any kind of lift and shift or anything, but just the exact one, and that could scale to 100,000 agents without making any changes.
I mean, Pasquale, that's talking about disrupting some of the biggest contact center BPO providers on planet Earth. Think about it. Like some of the, like for some of the leading BPO companies to just go in and propose what you just said. We both know what type of price tags comes along, oftentimes with even just doing the audit and the assessment to make the recommendations to the executive team, especially if we're talking about large companies. But the other piece to it too is then like you and I both know the same thing, which is some of the traditional leaders and some of the folks in the logos that have dominated the space traditionally. Not only do the people that have to use them every damn day, the agents, the guys and gals that are sitting on the desk trying to make those customers' experiences happen and trying to resolve things and trying to get stuff done, not only do they oftentimes not really like them, the customer, most importantly, they feel that they literally can feel it in most experiences. I know, for example, on the recent Bloomberg episode that you were on, you shared this example of like, why the hell do I have to tell Delta why I'm calling when I've been sitting in the Dallas airport waiting for the next flight for 3.5? Why do you think I'm calling Delta? Like even just knowing things about what's happened in the world and then understanding the proactivity piece, turning contact and customer support not into this reactive thing that it's been for decades and forever, but into a proactive thing where it's like, we already know what happened. So we assume you're calling because of this, already having recommendations or potential things to mitigate that customer disruption ready to go, whatever that might mean, whether it's have your next flight ready, here's your voucher for the next future flight, things like that. But like it's amazing how many companies still use these tools that don't get them that. So it's like having something that allows you to see all this in one spot, absolute game changer.
Yeah, I think the number one thing I would say is that we want to start by looking and saying, how would I fundamentally want to change 2 or 3 things that are going to materially impact my business? And so we'll say to customers, hey, what are the things you want to do? Because we know you're probably going to want to move off of another system and things like that. You have a bunch of metrics you have to maintain. And I'll say, well, what are the 3 things that would be game changing? And proactive engagement is almost always one that comes up right away when we talk to them. And so the interesting thing about Connect, I think, is that because we are because the way we designed it and the way we are paid for it, we're incented to only have outcomes where the customer actually wins are the only outcomes we care about, because that's what gets them to use it. And so people don't actually pay for Connect unless they actually get value for it, because they have to use it. So if you were to go experiment with it for 6 months, you didn't buy any upfront license, you didn't do anything. You just experimented, and then it's all it's all water under the bridge. In fact, we have a free tier. So for someone like you or I, we can have a contact center running for, for free for that 6 months. But the point of all this is I wanted to incent the people who work on my team, the salespeople, the SAs, all the people who are engaged on this to want the customer to be successful. And so that just creates a fundamental different mindset
Yep.
about how you go to market. And
Yep.
it's subtle because, and you don't think about how the customer is paying, but from day one, if you know the customer doesn't pay you unless they're actually using the product and successful, it changes your mindset.
Pasquale, when I'd take it a step further, that 1.27 trillion in spend, one could argue if the best companies on planet Earth, if the Amazons, Googles, Metas of the world use 20, 30, maybe 40% of their tech stack, and look, come on, you and I both know that's not, but like, there's almost something sneaky about how global SaaS sales have grown, because we all have to pay whether we use it or not. Now, don't get me wrong, over the last 10 plus years, customer success and retention efforts have gotten a little bit more sophisticated and have gotten a little bit more tighter around making sure that user adoption and usability and utilization are there, because then you already know you won't get the renewal if those things are low when you get to the end of that contract. But think about this, like, large enterprises on average can have over 300 different software applications running throughout their business. Mid-market companies, anywhere from 40 to 60 different SaaS solutions. And the small businesses, even me, and by the way, I'm guilty of this at CXChronicles, our small little team, we are literally doing an operative audit assessment right now, because even CXCs of the world get to the point where it's like, holy shit, we have 20 different tools that are sitting there in our tech stack. My point is this: all of us, for the most part, are paying for that shit, whether we use it, we don't use it, we're getting value from it, we're not getting value from it. So just calling out the model of like, hey, you pay for what you use, that alone, I think, is going to be a major disruptive type of force that breaks into that large 1.27 trillion. By the way, it's 1.27 trillion growing with a compound annual growth rate of almost 20%. So that number keeps getting bigger and badder and crazier. But love that. Love that you guys have kind of gone into this with that type of a model. And I actually think it's going to be incredibly disruptive. And I think that companies are still kind of figuring out what that actually means, because over these next 3 to 5 years, man, you already know things are going to be wildly different with little buddy AI on board. And then there's already going to be a plethora of future executives, future leaders that are understanding how to get smarter, sharper, tighter, use less tools, get excellent at using just a handful of tools that show the whole picture. So love this, man. I think it's awesome. Pasquale, I'd love to jump into the third pillar of process, and we're kind of this is awesome, by the way. You're throwing all this incredible golden nuggets out. How have you had to think about processes you've gone throughout your own career, and as you've gone through all the incredible roles that you've had at some massive companies, by the way? So I have to call that out, brother. These aren't normal companies that you've spent your time at. These are big, huge global companies. How have you had to kind of think about process, and said more specifically, has there been like a handful of ways that you've kind of gone about building your own living playbook for Pasquale in terms of the way that you kind of think about wrangling all the things that are happening? Is there a way that you have always empowered maybe your extended leaders to really where they own it? I'd love to just spend a few minutes kind of talking about how you think about process as it relates to building incredible customer and employee experiences.
Yeah, I think first off, I would say that process is often punishment for not doing the right things. And so my goal is always to make it the most obvious thing to do, the right thing to do. We try to build software like that for our customers. I try to build systems inside of Amazon for our employees that way. And then you can try to minimize process. Now, you need process for some stuff because certain things are just so important that you need to have them. Like I would say security is a place where I don't mind some process. Like I want to make sure that every day my team understands exactly what they have to do to build secure software. We have systems in place to make sure that happens. When I think about innovation and delivery of software, in terms of being fast, I want folks to have ownership. I want them to feel like if something goes right, they get the credit. If something goes wrong, they'll have to understand why and go correct it. And so the least I can do to try and make a bunch of tools they have to jump through, a bunch of hoops they have to jump through, the faster and better they'll be at that. And I mean, it's like, it's so much in life is like the little teeny pieces of friction in life are what slow you down and stop you. It's often not the really hard things. I kind of joke and say the hardest part about working out is putting your sneakers on.
Absolutely.
Once your sneakers are on, you will go work out.
Yep.
And so how do I help every day people wake up and I say, when you look at your PC across the room, do you look at it and think to yourself, or I'm excited to go to work today, or do you dread opening the PC? And the thing I say to them is like, if you're dreading it, you have two options. One is you come talk to me or someone like me, someone in the team, and say, how do we change that?
Absolutely.
Or let's find a different job, because you're probably a very smart person. You could go work somewhere else. I hope you choose the first one.
Yep.
Have to. I hope we're having a great time. But I start with that and just tell people all the time, like, hey, if we're implementing a process here, it's because we didn't do something right. And then we should take a step back and look at it. The second thing is that step back and look at it is actually really hard to do. Like, why were we doing this? Why did we start this process? It just sort of builds and sits there. And it's kind of like when you go by your house every day or leave somewhere every day, you don't notice how things sort of stack up until suddenly you've got a big pile of something, right? You open
Yep.
by the door or whatever it is, and you're like, oh crap, I need to go address this. It's good to have moments at the beginning of the year or at different parts of times of year where you take a step back and just say, are these processes things that are actually bringing value, or did we add them? So I actually have a person on my team who manages a lot of the security and stuff we do to make sure we're shipping the product with all the things we care about. Like when you work at AWS, we do a bunch of things with our API that are just really good, like cloud formation and stuff like that people love. Some customers don't use them, but the ones who do use it love it, and it makes it so it's consistent across everything, a cloud trail, so you can track everything you've done. These are really great tools for customers. And so that, in theory, that was her job, was to be just monitoring, make sure we do these things. And she took it upon herself one day to say, hey, how many things are we doing to make sure we're shipping the right software versus how many things are we doing in the security checkpoint pieces that are the same, or the same question asked 15% differently? And she actually took a whole step
Super
back
interesting. Super interesting.
and she cut 30% of the questions out of those two areas.
Wow.
And we took that and we went back to the core of AWS and we said, hey, we think we could get some more efficiency here for other teams too. And they were like, and instead of being like, oh, get out of here, that's not your job, or, you know,
Yep.
we know what we're doing.
Yep.
They were like, oh my God, this is great. And they totally invested in it. And so we pulled this back. And then those changes went through all of AWS, and we started to, and we made the improvement for everyone in AWS. She felt incredibly empowered to do that. Right.
Yep.
That wasn't what she was supposed to be doing when she woke up that morning. I'm like, that makes me like, you can't imagine how excited I am to hear her story.
100%. And then same for the employee to be given that ask or that task or that responsibility, or being put in a position of where, look, you're accountable. I'm giving you the accountability, the responsibility, the authority to go figure this out. That is one of the best. And to your point, people that get those opportunities, they're not going to be in your first camp of the people that dread to open up the PC every day. They're not. Those are the people that are going to continue to be inspired. Those are going to be the people that get looks from other executives within the business. Those are going to be the people that are oftentimes called upon for the next big task or ask or thing that somebody's got to get in there and wrangle up. So all incredible things. One thing that you made me think about really quick, Pasquale, before we jump off this, amazing how many companies. Okay, so lots of companies are getting good at having some basic form or iteration of a VOC or a voice of customer task force. Some companies are good at building some basic version or some type of version of a voice of product or a voice of builder. They can be called different things. Really, really interesting when you can slam those worlds together. We've had a couple, and don't get me wrong, this is not AWS size. So I imagine doing some of this type of task force management at a large company is going to be a little bit more difficult, to your point, because there's more stuff going on. But man, when you start to get the same folks that are thinking about the VOC efforts and all the good, the bad, the ugly, and you should already have a product or a builder sitting at that table, guys. Obviously, there better be somebody that knows how to build this shit sitting at that VOC task force table. But crazy how many times companies don't. So then they'll have a separate group that's doing voice of product, and they're doing their whole product roadmap, and they're doing their product prioritization. And those things aren't connected. And it's such an easy way. What I'm saying is, another way of what you just shared with your employee who was able to do that, people that are working on a VOC or a customer facing side, and then our friends that are building everything on the back end, we might be saying the same exact thing, but we're using different language. We're using different vernacular. We're calling something a slightly different term. So then there's like, so that getting that 30% of shave off, or that 30% of just even communal agreement and validation or approval of what's happening in front of you, that's a huge win for any company too, whether it's AWS or whether it's a small business working on its first $10 million a year in revenue. So super, super interesting points here.
Yeah, I love the comments you just made. And the thing I'll say is when I talk to my team, I'll talk about the, empowerment, and I'll say to them, two things. On the product side, I'll say, do you really understand what's stopping customers from loving your product, from using your product? And then what are you doing to fix them? Do you really feel like you have that prioritized right? And I'll say to the engineers who I always hope are also paying attention to the customers. And I will tell you that one of the biggest mistakes companies make is they don't let the engineers talk to the customers.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you, man. 100% agree with you.
And man, engineers love talking to customers. They may not want or love listening to customers. They may not want to talk to them, but they love listening to customers. Some like to talk to them. And so you give them that opportunity to interact with them, and it fundamentally changes their viewpoint. And I'll say to the engineers, and I'll say this in the next couple of weeks when we'll have a sort of an all hands meeting, and I'll just say to them, I'll say, hey, if you're working on something that you don't think benefits the customer, you should go tell your manager.
Pull the ending cord. Pull the ending cord.
Exactly. And then and you should feel connected to what you're doing every day. And as you talked about, the people who want to get up and go to work every morning, the number one thing that makes people want to go to work is feeling that they're working on something that matters, that something's important to people, right? And if you feel like that, that's a great thing. The people you're around, super important. A bunch of other things really important. Getting paid, obviously, people need jobs for a reason, but all those things pale in comparison for most people to the feeling of like what I'm doing matters today.
Absolutely, 100%, man. Couldn't agree more. Pasquale, I'd love to dive into the fourth and the final six pillar of feedback. Can you spend maybe a minute or two talking about some of the ways that AWS is collecting, analyzing, and then most importantly, acting upon the customer feedback? And then you just started to get into the employee feedback part. So, but any other thoughts around same type of question? How are you guys sort of leveraging that frontline or that engineering and development type of experience to make sure that you guys are keeping your priorities in the right type of place? I'd love for you to spend a few minutes talking about feedback.
Yeah, well, the feedback can come in different forms, obviously, and some of it is just instrumentation of your code to see what people do. And that's a very honest set of feedback because you can't lie about what you do, but it doesn't always tell you why people do what they do. And so I think it's important to have that understanding at the base level of what the product is being used for, how people are using it. And I always believe what people do over what they say. But once you sort of see what people are doing, now you have to go and dive in. And so we have very, very detailed conversations with our customers about what they're trying to achieve. And the one thing I always say to them is, let's up-level this conversation and not talk about the technical implementation you're trying to achieve, but let's talk about the outcome you want to work back from the customer on, and let's figure out how we get to that point of view. And a lot of times customers will come to us and say, I want this feature. And in the kind of, well, I'll say, I always want all my product managers, and certainly I'll say, okay, but why? Why do you want to do this?
Yeah. Do you
And,
ask it 5 times?
Yeah, so often I do. And so, and those are often the best conversations. This feedback I find comes very naturally when again, you've set up a situation where what winning looks like is that we're together making a choice to move forward with a project and an outcome for their end customers. So once we decide, hey, we're going to charge based on usage and value, therefore, of the product, suddenly both people are on the same side, and then the feedback starts flowing in really, really smoothly, right? And that at that point we can go have a conversation, and I'm a huge believer that you use data and anecdotes together. And so I will know the name of the person who gave the feedback. And literally, I'm like, what did Barbara at this company say? And would she be happy with the outcome of what you've done to now solve her
I
problem?
like it. That's good. You're connecting right to it, man.
And then and the folks will be like, oh, it's Barbara again. But I'm like, but it allows you to have this conversation in a much more real and visceral way. And then it's not that you want someone to design. You can't design a product for any one person and know that else everyone else will be unhappy. But at the same time, these folks provide these anecdotes that drive through. And Jeff Bezos once said, he said, if you have in the face of data and anecdotes, believe the anecdotes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The anecdotes will help you figure out why the data is not telling you the whole story, right?
I was just going to literally ask. It's amazing that you just brought that quote up from Jeff Bezos. Someone in your seat that's seen this level of volume across the globe, some of the biggest businesses, and you've worked with all these different groups. Are we getting to a point in customer experience where I call NPS, CSAT, customer reference, some of these things, rear view metrics, are these about to die? Because when you say that even Jeff Bezos agrees with, hey man, pick up the phone and call your frickin' customer and see how she's doing and ask her what she needs more of and ask her where you're killing it and ask her where you need to get back. Because I know that, and it's coming from a CX nerd like me, but and I built my career doing and computing some of this stuff, but Man, I think it's back to conversations all damn day. And then I think with AI, which is interesting, I know that AI will be able to help us synthesize and it'll help us optimize. We'll get quicker. But we're already seeing all these areas where a human says a thing and it just gets plugged into the transcription. Whereas if a Pasquale or Adrian hears, "I'm sorry, did you just say that you've already went and talked to two of our top three competitors?" Well, hold on, stop. Like, so, like, what are your thoughts on this? And is this just another part of like the changing world, or do you think that we're maybe going to start seeing the devaluation of some of these metrics that traditionally boards and executive groups kind of have come to have as their, what do you like? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think I could just say yes to your question. I'd answer it pretty clearly, but I think but I'm happy to dive in a little more. Like, I mean, yes, the clearly we've been measuring stuff the best we could, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe, at least hopefully the best people have been measuring it the best they could. The reality is that historically you just couldn't measure enough things to have meaningful information, because the true answer to every one of these things is every single interaction, every human being is an individual. Can learn a lot by individuals by seeing how they were, an individual by how other people who are in the same situation behave and how they did behave.
Yep.
But without actually understanding every interaction, there's no way to actually functionally do that. I use the example of the password reset all the time, which
Oh,
we don't have agents doing password resets, but bear with me on this example. But someone calls in and says, "Hey, I need to reset my password," and the agent will start helping them. And you can use this for metaphor for anything. And then by halfway through, the person says, "Yeah, I'm resetting my password so I can cancel my subscription." And what is an agent going to do? They're going to diligently reset the password unless they're incredibly empowered to change the behavior.
sure.
But
Yep.
they're feeling like they're going to get metric on how fast do I get off the phone.
And they're just teeing up a churn.
And yeah, and then did I get the job done and then get off the call? And maybe did I say the thing I'm supposed to say goodbye with the right words I was supposed to say in
Yep.
case what happens to listen to the call later and catch me. It's an awful behavior, right? Instead, you want
Yeah.
a person, first off, let's automate whatever the situation is. And if it requires a human being to be engaged, let's help them do it faster. Let's automate the stuff like resetting passwords. It's not useful for a human being to be involved in. But like, and then so those humans can now act like human beings. We can make them even superhuman, but we can get them to the point where being a human being matters at doing the things that human beings are good at. And so
Yes.
once we get down that path, we start then helping them, and we can also then hear that statement and say, "Hey, we can either tell that person that agent, hey, you probably need to take a different view here because this customer just gave you this incredibly important set of information." You
Yep.
also then say, okay, no, instead of that, because this person is not the right person to go address this person's dissatisfaction, we want to then send this to somebody else. But that would
Yep.
have been measured as a dissatisfied call. The person got everything they wanted done. They would have been,
Yeah.
they might have got a 10 out of 10 CSAT score.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
they're
Yep.
they're obviously a miserable customer if they're calling to quit, right? And they're probably really frustrated because they couldn't even do it the way they wanted to. Well, let's reel that all the way back in and then have them and think about, well, how do we even predict that customer is having a bad experience with the product? What can I see about this customer that's like other customers? So instead of waiting for them to have this serendipitous moment of learning on the phone, instead I can predict it. And now I'm engaging
Absolutely.
earlier. And that's where we have to get to. And it's not going to be easy because it's going to require thought, and it's going to
Absolutely.
require a new set of metrics and also a new set of like tools. And that's where I think Connect comes in, is because we can analyze every single interaction. We can look at the history of the customer. We can look at the outcomes afterwards. We can start saying, hey, folks who did this are likely to want to do this,
Yep.
for good and bad. How do we
Yep.
help them achieve those goals or get them to see the value in the product so they don't want to leave?
Yep.
This is a new change. And what that means is someone like you or someone else in the situation of so many of my customers gets to have a different conversation with their boss too, which is to say the CEO cares deeply about this. They just didn't have the tools, and the people who were doing this in the customer service centers and didn't have the tools to actually be able to go act on it. Well, we're going to
Yep.
fundamentally change that right now.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Pasquale, this has been absolutely fantastic, man. Number one, I'm so appreciative of you coming on and taking the time to do the show with us and sharing your story. No question about why you guys are performing the way you are. You guys are crushing it and you're killing it. I hope this is the first of many conversations. Before I do let you go, my friend, where and I got to ask that, but where can people find out more about AWS if they're interested in learning about some of the things that we talked about? And then where can people reach out to you or find you if they want to reach out, or something that you said today got them thinking about something they want to get in touch with you or your team?
Yeah, of course. So I think people can probably find the AWS website, a quick search for Amazon Connect on, and you'll get,
I
that'll
think
be,
you probably find her, right?
oh yeah, that one's not too hard.
Yeah.
Our SEO is
I
not too
had to
bad.
ask you, man.
Yeah.
We finish every show this way.
Folks are welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I read every one of those messages. I'm not that fast to always respond, but I will read every one of them. If they have an interesting question, I'm happy to respond there. I love the folks who are out there trying to make a difference in the world. And I think we are doing it, one person at a time is the new way to do it.
100%. Pasquale, this has been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the CX Chronicles podcast.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Be sure to check out the CXC website. And as always, find us on any of your favorite podcast players, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and more.